Hello, everyone, and welcome to Attuning to the Voice of Mother Earth, How to Hear Her and Follow Her Call Global Conference, where through inspiring interviews, we are invited to explore real actions we can take as individuals to deepen our connection to Mother Earth, while at the same time discovering a way to our truer selves. My name is Maya Zaharov, and I'm your host and a producer of Attuning to the Voice of Mother Earth Summit, and a founder of Sisters Wellspring. And today we're joined by Flora Ware. Welcome, Flora.
Hello, thank you.
It's really nice to have you here with us today. And so the topic of our talk today is cyclic living. And so can you tell us, like, what is cyclic living? What does that mean to you?
Sure. Well, cyclic living or cyclic living really is, I feel it's our ancient future, which means that it's really our only way of moving forward as a species on this planet, by remembering what our ancient ancestors knew, how our ancient ancestors knew to live in harmony with the environment. And that the term cyclic living is a newer term to describe what was innate, what was necessary for survival. Really was having a relationship with the land and having an intuitive sense of the rhythms and cycles of nature. So for me, it's something I live. It's an embodied practice, and it's a way of being attuned to Mother Earth. So I'm really pleased and excited to be here and having this conversation, and so thrilled that you're opening these conversations that are about attuning and getting attuned, and really what that means, and being in alignment and in a rhythm. The
Yeah, wonderful. So can you tell us, like, how did you learn about this way of being?
mm. Well, as I said in my introduction, I went to my first full moon women's circle in 1993, which is a long time ago now, and I was a young teenager, and that event really catalyzed my remembering of this ancient way of being, gathering in a circle and sharing wisdom and sharing songs around the fire. And that was it. That one experience put me on this path, and I've been living attuned to the cycles of the moon and attuned to the Celtic wheel of the year, which is the turning of the seasons, ever since. So it's been my way of living, in a way of honoring the passage of time, and also my my different stages of life. And of course, I've read books, and I've studied with different people about practices, but honestly, the way that I've learned is by living it and by paying attention.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. There's something special to be said about just sharing this space uh, with other women sitting in the circle. I can just picture it around the fire. Yeah, I can see how that would be a transformative experience for sure. And so, can you tell us more about the Celtic wheel? And like how we can just tell us a little more about what is or cyclic living, as you said it. Moon is one way, like the seasons are another, and how does that all play together?
Yeah, that's where I really love to look at how they work together. The Celtic wheel of the year is can be illustrated in a beautiful graphic, which is actually a circle, a wheel, and there's 8 spokes on it. And most people are familiar with the main 4 of the spring and the autumn equinoxes and the winter and summer solstices, right? We even on the very generic mainstream calendars, you'll see that like first day of spring, first day of summer. And so we have some sense of awareness of that. The reason that it refers to Celtic is because it was the Celtic people that of continental Europe, and especially the British Isles, that it's really the most well known. And so it illustrates our wheel of the year with the northern hemisphere. So I should say that in the southern hemisphere, of course, they're on an opposite seasonal cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so their seasons are opposite. So the Celtic wheel of the year indicates that origin, but also that it is connected to the northern hemisphere. So that's why for many people it does speak to what we're living. Now I know you're in Florida, so you are in a more tropical, you don't necessarily have the 4 distinct seasons in the same way that I do here in British Columbia, but it can still be that map for us of what's happening. And in between the solstices and the equinoxes are the other 4 cross quarter days that they call them. And so that's another, when you want to really get into this and understand it, that's when you start to understand what are those midway points between, and there's different festivals. And to connect it to the lunar phases, I say the same thing. If you're new to paying attention to the lunar phases, then just focus on learning the 4 main phases of the new moon, the first quarter, the full moon, and the last quarter. And those connect to those solstices and equinoxes that I spoke of. So
Yeah, that's wonderful. So how do you connect to them personally? Do you just notice them? You mentioned festivals, so do you celebrate them? How do you bring them into your life?
yeah, I love being able to celebrate these festivals with ceremony and ritual whenever possible. And I'm very blessed to have a strong online community. So we're having this interview in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, and so a lot of us are needing to stay home and be online, and that's a really beautiful way to connect with people online. But really in person is the best way that we can come together and have these celebrations. And in terms of my own personal practice, yeah, I've been aware of these cycles for so long that they really are second nature to me. But of course, I still have my my day timer that has all the lunar phases. And because I am a ceremonial priestess, I always know when the new moons or the full moons are happening because I'm busy. I'll be leading some ritual, or I'll be doing a guided meditation. For the solo practitioner, that there's different practices or rituals that you can do to really start to tune in to the cycles. But really the very beginning of it, like I keep on saying, is simply having an awareness of it first. And then from that awareness, I always encourage people to trust their own intuition and inspiration of what they want to do, how they want to commemorate the equinox or a full moon, whatever is feeling like an individual needs in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that it first comes in awareness, and maybe later, you might want to do something quote unquote extra, to celebrate, to bring it in, to, maybe come with, like you said, in community in celebrating them. So I can see.
Exactly.
Wow, that sounds great. So the I guess the archetype of the mother, you know, is the first primal archetype. Is that right?
Ex- Yeah, great example. I usually lean on that one too. That um, mothers can look very different on the outside, right? If we look at a mother from thousands of years ago and today, like a modern day mother, right? On the outside, there can be the different trappings and looks, but at the essence, the
Hmm.
energy of the mother archetype is the same no matter what point in history, what location, or the individual. So that's where the archetypes allow us to understand the essence.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Can you introduce us to some more?
Oh, sure. Well, for in the context of this global summit, and also my topic of cyclic living, very connected to the archetype of the Lady of Communion, who you might know through different myth as being embodied by the goddess Artemis or Diana. That she is the she's very connected to nature. She is the friend to the animals and to the plants. She's lives in the forest. She hunts with her dogs, right? Artemis is the goddess of the moon. She's also goddess of the hunt. So yes, even though she's a hunter, she always has her bow and arrow. She still very much respects and protects the animals as well. And so the lady, as archetypally, the Lady of Communion speaks to our our dependence on the environment for our survival.
Hmm.
And it seems to me that that's something that modern humans have forgotten, how dependent we are. We've become dangerously detached and out of sync with nature. It's like we want to believe that we are separate from nature, right? That we aren't nature. In fact, if you talk to a lot of people, they wouldn't even think. You remember that we are mammals, right? Like we are, we are simply another species of mammal living on this planet. But it's like we just think no. We've been taught to believe that we're superior to animals and to plants and other inanimate like rocks and different things in our environment. We've also been taught that we are separate, and so this belief, which is false, but this belief that we are superior and separate keeps us out of that alignment. And as we're seeing, and this really started in the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
really, so it's really only been the last few hundred years, and so we're now dangerously out of sync with the very source of our, like, what we need to survive, to live. And what I feel like we're really seeing nowadays, and especially with this pandemic, as we're being faced to really look at what's essential for us, is that we need to really look at how we're in that relationship with each other and with the environment. What we can no longer thrive in this misaligned relationship. So archetypally, again, I say all that, but archetypally, the Lady of Communion helps us back into that union and
Mhm.
that ancient sacred marriage that we had with the land. She when she wakes up in us, and we're certainly seeing that this archetype is awakening in women. Even when you start seeing it in pop culture, you know that there's a mass awakening. Like Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games is Artemis, hands right down to the bow and arrow, right? So she's the Lady of Communion. Where I can't even remember. Oh, even that pop violinist Lindsey Sterling recently put out an album and a song called Artemis. And there was something else I'm seeing, that we're seeing this archetype of the Lady of Communion, of Artemis, awakening and coming back into our consciousness. And that's really exciting, because when that archetype wakes up in women, we remember
Mhm.
our role as guardians
Yeah.
of the land.
Yes. That's beautifully shared, beautifully said. Absolutely. I think um, I, I've never heard of this term "Lady of Communion" as an archetype, but of course I've heard, of the Artemis, the Princess Diana, in the Roman times,
Yeah,
she was a huntress. So it's interesting that um, because she's a huntress, she gets her own food basically. She's connected to it, and I think one of the things you mentioned that we've become so disconnected since the Industrial Revolution is maybe that was a step we've taken that put us away from us personally having to tend for our food daily. I'm not counting going to a grocery store as, as providing for your food. Although it is getting your food, I think just counting on someone else who's connected to the land to bring it to us in whatever ways, mass factory farming or, animal husbandry. I think it has given us this this illusion of superiority that food is always here. We don't have to come down to the earth and tend to the earth and thank her and be in communion, as you said, like Artemis is. So I think this is the step that, or one of them, that led us to separation. And I think it's interesting to see how the pop culture, how our culture is waking up, and it's a wonderful thing that women do wake up to this to this archetype within them, and understand that uh, we have a responsibility
yeah,
to Mother Earth, to other animals, to the whole web of life. Otherwise, well, we know what's happening. Otherwise, we're not going to make it.
exactly. Which is why I say that this is our ancient future. We have no future on this planet unless we start remembering these truths, that we are not separate from all of that. We are part of it. And when we remember that interconnection, our decisions and our actions are so much different. And you're absolutely right. And it's not like I'm saying that everyone needs to suddenly be responsible for providing all of their own food or supplies. No, that's never been the way that it was. One farmer focused on growing wheat, and one farmer, focused on growing or having cows or goats that would provide milk and butter, and we'd trade and all this. Of course we do that, right? But what are you contributing to? It's just become so easy in our modern culture, like you said, to feel so separate from the process and the place that our food comes from, and the convenience that we choose is killing us.
Yeah, absolutely. And another way of separation, if we were more, even if, let's say, I was a farmer growing wheat and you were a farmer, I don't know, growing corn, or even like having cattle, and we would trade, then we would know that we would be more attuned to the cycles also. When
Exactly.
to plant, when to harvest, when to expect, when something, God forbid, goes wrong, and things don't come out as you expect. Is the rain, coming in its good cycle? Are we getting enough sun? How is the wheel the wheel of the weather, how is that working? And yeah, I think that that's also a step in the separation. And as you said, it would be ludicrous to, of course, I'm not gonna buy a farm all of a sudden. I don't even have the funds or know what to do or have the desire to. But just having this awareness within, paying attention to what's happening out there in the world, in nature, outside, in the seasons, that in itself brings you closer to the land. And it doesn't have to be necessarily, uh, like, let's say, pagan ways, as people call it, which is where it all originated from in the first place. But even religiously, you can, celebrate Easter, and where Easter is coming from. It's all coming from the land. It's the rebirth, regeneration. Summer's coming.
Yes. Yes, and you know what? I'm so glad that you brought this up because I thought our conversation might go here about yeah, paganism, or what is this pagan thing? Because for so long that's been used as a derogatory term, as a term that's like a put down, and so but I actually looked it up. I was like, so what is like the dictionary definition of pagan? And it really was quite simply that someone who uh, did not believe or prescribe to one of the three main religions of Christianity, Muslim, or Jewish, and instead believed in nature, believed that was what they were connected to, was nature. And so there's no other evil undertones with paganism, but lots of people who are raised within a religion would have heard that term being used in a bad way. And so there's a lot of healing that people have to do when they choose to not necessarily maybe like step away completely from their religious beliefs, but to add on, to add in some more pagan type beliefs, or honoring that connects you to the seasons, to even the moon cycles, or to that, because they can feel at odds. They can feel like, oh, does this go against this belief? And at the truth, it's, well, no, it does. One doesn't cancel the other out, but unfortunately, yeah, the main religions have often used that term as a put down for people who were uncivilized, unenlightened, basically just the simple pagans, the heathens, really. So I'm glad that you brought this up, because I don't think you need to just like step away from your religion necessarily. You can add this in, because really, if we aren't in relationship and in a relationship of respect with our environment, I come back to what we cannot thrive without that. Like, what is that thinking at
Yeah.
all? That thinking is really what's got us in this whole mess in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the reason why paganism was considered, how it got a negative connotation is because it was maybe um, equivalated with idol worshiping. So
Mm,
it's glad I'm happy you looked it up in the definition, because I think it for me that it didn't have to be. It has nothing to do with idol worshiping. It to me it seems like it's just a deeper way of connecting to nature, and it's what's interesting is that, like you said, it doesn't have one. It's not one or the other. You can you can have a religion, any of the three main religions, Christianity, Judaism, or um, Muslims. You can have any one of them. For instance, like I've traveled to Peru with Mariela Maya, who I've interviewed earlier. So she led this wonderful trip, and we were steeped in the how locals live. We interacted with the locals, and it was wonderful to see how deeply they're connected to nature, and they do get um, their food primary right from the crop or the stuff that they grow, the gardens, or even they have sheep. They showed us how they shave the sheep, wash the wool, dye it right there, and weave fabric out of it. So they're so deeply connected, and they do offerings. They have local shamans and medicine women and men who are offering to making these very serious offerings to Mother Earth, while at the same time, they're also deeply religious. They follow Christianity. So, and they observe all the holidays and have huge parades for different religious holidays, while at the same time, not forgetting where they come from. So,
yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that. And that's something that is a really big topic for white people living in North America, really, because we are we are displaced. We feel a sense of being displaced. So many people don't have that connection and that sense of belonging to where they live. All of us, if we're white and we live in North America, all of us are descendants of immigrants, of settlers. We are not indigenous to this land. And when I traveled to Ireland, it was such a beautiful and healing experience to see white people living as indigenous with the land.
Mhm.
So, but I truly believe that we can find that here. We can find a sense of belonging, and in fact, again, it's vital that we do.
Yes.
It's vital that we find that, because in fact that's another reason why I feel like we've been able to commit the atrocities to our environment, or be complicit in knowing the different systems and businesses or whatever that are doing that. It's because we don't feel connected to where we live. And nowadays moving all over the place is normal. And so even someone who, oh, well, I was born here, but then we moved here and now I live here, like, even that, right?
Mhm.
But how do you cultivate that sense of belonging and that beautiful rootedness in place? It's so important for us to feel that, because once you do, you wouldn't make choices that would poison or destroy your where you live. So healing that sense of belonging, that rootedness, and I feel right now giving a shout out to a wonderful book called If Women Rose Rooted. Read this book, If Women Rose Rooted, because it's, again, it speaks to this, and healing that disconnection from feeling connected to where we live.
Yeah. That's I've heard the title for sure
Mm.
before, so it's great that you read it and are familiar with it. And you're right, that's the reality, and that's the beautiful part of it too, that we are not having to be in one place if we don't want to be. But oftentimes too, we're also like so connect, so we have to go by circumstance. You get a better job or you lose a job, unfortunately, and you just have to go somewhere else, even if you don't feel a great calling to go there, or if you do feel a great connection to where you are right now. So these are the sad realities of our time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It is, and yet I believe that we can cultivate that sense of rootedness in ourselves, that we can bring that feeling of belonging and knowing how to put down roots, and I mean on the metaphorical plane of putting down roots, but also in tangible ways. As well, about how it's so many of us have forgotten how to live in community,
Mhm.
and what that really means and what that looks like. And,
Yeah.
again, I want to reflect that I think that that's hopefully one of the beautiful gifts of this pandemic, that a lot of people are looking out for their neighbors in ways that they never
Mhm.
did before. And we're feeling that connection. So it's really, again, this ties in with a sense of cyclic living, because the if every one of us that does
Mhm.
tune in and plug into a reverence and an embodied practice of cyclic living, we create a ripple effect out into our families and into our communities,
Mhm.
that then let other people remember to trust cyclic wisdom.
Yes. Hmm. It's true. So I just wanted to ask you, what about for we're talking about connection to nature, how to cultivate, what we would gain from it. So what would you say for people who, live in large urban centers? How, like, why would the cyclic, as you say, sorry, living be like relevant and important to them?
Oh yeah. If you live in a city, you do have to work a little harder, you know, quote unquote. I lived in a city for many years in my 20s, and you know, granted, Vancouver, BC is probably one of the most connected to nature cities around, but still, you have to pay a little more attention to it. Some people don't even have a balcony, right, to have like some plants out there, or even to be outside. It's true. I was you know, I lived in basement apartment suites at different times in my lives, and so it was tricky. But really, you just need to bring that awareness when you are outside, even on your commute to and from work.
Mhm.
Are you looking up at the sky? Are you noticing the changes in the trees that are along the way or just around you? You know, it's even more important really for people who live in urban centers to have some kind of practice or some kind of connection. But
Mhm.
yeah, if you do have a balcony, you know, plant some tomato plants in the spring, or maybe you want to grow some herbs. You know, that act of planting seeds,
Mhm.
tending to them, having some kind of harvest from it and everything. It's simple, but it's really beautiful. And another wonderful thing seeing in so many cities is community gardens. Can you find a community garden? Can you help organize to build a community garden?
Mhm.
You know, we're seeing so much of that happening, and people being really innovative and using
Mhm.
walls. You can grow a lot of things up walls with the right supports, and to bring nature back into the city, back into the cities, is a wonderful thing. And so that's, you know, that's one of those things. But honestly, the simplest practice that you can do is to look up at the sky, to look around you, and just to pay attention to the environment as it changes through the seasons.
Yes, that's I couldn't agree more. So for someone who, you know, who's completely new to this, like, would you have a suggestion, like, where do you start? I mean, you mentioned, you know, planting a garden or whatever, or planting even some tomato place, but plants. But someone who knows nothing about plants, never planted before, doesn't even know how to start, like, where do we go? Where do we start?
Right. Well, again, if someone's new to this, you know, this concept of cyclic living, and I just want to come back to like, what is it that that is calling you, that is inspiring you? Like, is it planting seeds and having, you know, a few container gardening? You know, is that it? If it's not, then don't try to do that. You know, don't try to do something because you think that that's what you should do, or that's what's going to
Force
get you
yourself.
connected.
It's not gonna go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So so if it's the moon, if you want to feel more connected to that, there's lots of resources. You know, I have resources. There's plenty of resources out there where you can just start to pay attention to the phases. And you know, and for women especially, I do recommend, you know, finding a sister circle, maybe online, but maybe in person in your area, that likely meets on the new moons or the full moons. And if you can start getting into ceremony and into sisterhood on a regular basis around that, and you start to surround yourself with people who are also on that path, that's going to be not only the quicker way, because it's not necessarily about speed, but it's also going to be the most beautiful and enriching way that you can bring that into your life. I mean, sure, I could recommend an app that would keep you up to date on the lunar phase, but that's really not going to bring the real magic into your life. So find your sisters, find your kin. And you know, and for the men out there too, you know, there's co-ed groups that meet, and there's also, you know, there's places for you to find your brothers on this path as well. But that's a few tips that I always recommend. And like I said, you can find communities online, no problem at all. So look locally, but also look online. Start 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 bringing it into your daily life.
Hmm.
That's the way.
Yeah. The, what you said is true. Yeah, if you can find a women's circle, this is there's no better way of being supported and feeling whole. But and as you said, right now, especially physical presence, nothing can beat that. But if anything else, the online group circle is as a way to start. Maybe
Hmm.
before you
Hmm.
transition to something closer. Yeah. So I wanted to let the audience know that you have a wonderful gift for them. Um, would you want to say a few words about that?
Yes. Well, yeah. So it's my cyclic living guide. So it really is a great starting place. So in my cyclic living guide, there's two illustrated charts that are designed for you to print out and have on your wall,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can have that visual reminder. And one's for the northern hemisphere and one's for the southern hemisphere. And it illustrates the whole guide, and the chart illustrates the 8 phases of the lunar and solar creation cycles. And so the 8 lunar phases that we go through each month, those are the smaller phases that we go through every moon, every month. Then they connect to the 8 solar phases throughout the year. So these are like micro and macro rhythms that we can begin to be really aware of. And so, yeah, it's a free gift for you. And I hope if this has piqued anyone's curiosity and you want to learn more, have something that gives you some more ideas, suggested practices and themes for each of the 8 phases, yeah, you can grab your free copy of my Cyclic Living Guide.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I will include a link to Flora's free gift right underneath this video recording. So I wanted to just tell you, just to thank you for being here with us, for sharing um, f- for giving us your offerings, your life wisdom, what you've learned. So thank you. I enjoyed having this time with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Maya. And I really, really celebrate the vision that you're holding with this summit. And it's these conversations are so needed right now, that to bring us into that harmonious relationship again, and remembering that it is a remembering to be in that harmonious relationship again with ourselves and with each other, and with the environment. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.